My mom documented every dime we spent because somebody was going to call her into an office and make her account for that. She knew it. You try being the daughter who ends up having to take over that person's financials.
Welcome to Retire Today. I'm your host, Jeremy Keil, and we're here to help you create your dream retirement. Today, we're talking with Beth Pinsker about financial caregiving. Beth, welcome to the show.
Nice to be here. Thank you, Jeremy.
Yes, and we're talking financial caregiving because you went through a situation, a time of life where you are a financial caregiver for your mom, and you wrote a book about it, which is why we're here. We want people to learn about your story. You put some other stories in there too from others, so that they can hopefully be better prepared for their story. But let's learn a little bit more about Beth and her family here. You are a certified financial planner.
Yes.
You are a financial columnist. How did you how did you view things like estate planning and caregiving before you had this experience?
I, did the coursework and I deal with people every day with these questions. And I dealt with them, I realized, from a very academic standpoint. These are your best case scenarios. This is what you want to do. I would tell people over and over how important power of attorney was, as if that was the end of the process. Like, you need to have a power of attorney document, you know, period, full stop. And then I got in this caretaking situation with my mother, and I realized that everything that I had learned about the practicalities of it are not talked about at all. And there's very little information out there to navigate the real ins and outs that people face on a daily basis. The 4% rule, learning about RMDs, like, none of that makes any difference to the person like going through this stuff, and especially the caretaking tasks of having to try to figure that out for some other adult human being, not a child, who doesn't have a complicated financial life, but like a really, you know, an adult who's living a really full life, with a house and a car and health insurance and savings and life insurance and all the complications that, an adult person has.
Yeah, take all the complications in your own financial life. Well, now you got another adult's financial life.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
call the book, the title is My Mother's Money. And I'm reading it through, and I've realized that this is a great title. I'm a fan of your title, where it's a bit about your mother, it's a
Yes.
bit about her money. And so
Yes.
My Mother's Money is a great title. Tell me a little bit about your mom, and tell me a little bit about her relationship with money.
My mom was a school teacher, a public high school teacher in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and my dad was a college professor, an English professor, and as stereotypical an English professor as you can imagine, with the sport coat with the elbow patches and a pipe,
Yes.
and
Mm-hmm.
absolutely no practical life skills. He could read books and he could lecture and write. He couldn't unload the dishwasher. One time in my childhood, they turned him away from the bank when he tried to sign a check because they didn't recognize his own signature, on his own account. In those days,
Yes.
my mom was like a sub, she wasn't even eligible for her own bank account. But my mom just used to sign his name because she handled everything. And so my mom was a very practical, competent, meticulous person. My dad, one of the core experiences of my childhood, which I write about in the book, is that we were audited 3 times while I was growing up by the IRS. And this formed my relationship with money from a very early age. My mom documented every dime we spent at any moment, in the 18 years I lived at home, because somebody was going to call her into an office and make her account for that at some point. She knew it. And every year she was determined to fight the IRS and keep them, keep the dogs at bay, basically. And she never lost an audit. One time, the most complicated audit she had was after a year we spent traveling in Europe when my dad was on a grant, and she had kept track in a little notebook of the exchange rates on every single day of the year that we were away, and they owed her money at the end of it all.
I think she won. I
Yeah.
think she maybe enjoyed it a little bit to be to win.
Yes, and you try being the daughter who ends up having to take over that person's financials when she's in her late 70s. I was terrified the entire time that she was going to, rebound and get better and come back online to handle her own affairs and be like, where did you put the money? What did you do with this? I want an accounting of every penny that you touched. And I just went into the whole thing just assuming she was going to be furious with me.
Yeah, and well, there's a lot into that, and part of it's and you mentioned this book. You were your mom's daughter. You
Yes.
were also her financial caregiver. So it's like you have your own role, you have your own life going on, and you've got to kind of come back and be more of a daughter than maybe happens when you're adults, and then also
Yes.
be more of a caregiver than anyone wants to be on there. So tell me about you. You had these two roles. I want to hear about that, but also when did you know this was going to happen? When did you realize, wait a second, I'm not just Beth. I've got these things to be going on to help my mama.
Yeah, so it happened pretty fast because my mom had a spinal surgery and she asked me to come down there to help her. So the surgery was in November of 2022. And it was clear right away that she wasn't going to bounce back. It wasn't going to be, 2 weeks in rehab and then she's just back home living her life. She was only 76 and she wasn't sick in any other significant way. She didn't have cancer. She didn't have, any other major diagnosis. And so, we all thought she'd have the surgery. It would help her with her back pain and life would go on. But she just got sicker and sicker and complications and infections and things just went like steadily downhill. And about 3 weeks into her experience, when we thought she was going to be coming home and getting back to her regular existence, it was clear that she was not. And at that point, I knew that there were bills that needed to be paid. And she's an older lady. She doesn't trust online banking at that point. And she, paid all of her bills manually. And I thought, stuff's going to go south here pretty fast. The mortgage needs to be paid, the electric bill needs to be paid, her credit card, all of this basic household stuff needs to be taken care of. And I have to do it suddenly. I'm like sitting at her desk realizing that, like, oh my God, like there's a stack of mail here and I've got to go through it and figure out what needs to be done because she was in no shape to even answer questions from me.
You've been saving your whole life for retirement, but how do you actually retire? My name's Jeremy Keil, and I take my clients through a 5-step retirement planning process so they can be ready for retirement. I put that whole process into my book, Retire Today, so that you can create your retirement master plan in 5 simple steps. If you're trying to create your retirement plan, head on over to jeremykeil.com, JeremyKeil.com to buy your copy of my new book, Retire Today.
Like she was cognizant, but she just didn't want to deal with it. And so she asked me to help her, and that was the role I had to take on because that's what she needed from me. And when you're in that situation, even I talked to so many people for my book who didn't have good relationships with their parents. I had a great relationship with my mom. I loved her. She was a fantastic person, but I would have done it even if she was horrible. And lots of people do that. It's really, really hard to say no to this stuff when you are next of kin and you're the person named on that form that they've filled out, that you're the one that they trust. There's really no getting out of it in an easy way.
Yeah, and you hear stories some people that do say no, and there's a lot of social expectations. I think family expectations and um, is a bit of responsibility, right? I think you were probably raised like this is what we do. We take care of others, and that's what you did for your mom. You mentioned that you went through her stack of mail. That was one of your first tasks, right? You're supposed to kind of take care of these bills, go through the stack of mail. What did you find that What did you find there? What happened?
I found a very big past due notice from the long-term care insurance that scared me to death.
Yeah,
I'm like, "What the
that's the
heck?"
wrong time to find that.
No. Um, and what had been happening is that my mom was not feeling well before the surgery, but she hadn't told any of us. And I think that's pretty common for people too, where financial tasks like keeping up on paperwork start to slip. And with she was already in a claim with her long-term care insurance, and so paperwork needed to be filled out on a regular basis in order to get reimbursement. And she had stopped filling it out because it was too onerous for her. Her back hurt too much. She couldn't sit at her desk. It involved downloading the bank records of the check image and printing it out, cutting out each check image, gluing it to a piece of paper, filling out the timesheet, getting the timesheets signed. It was a lot of you know, just tedious paperwork, and she just stopped doing it, and she had stopped for more than 90 days prior to this point. And so the she went out of claim, and she went
Mm,
back to needing to pay a premium, and the problem was that it was a really large premium.
yeah,
Somebody needed to get them over $6,000 really fast. Like, um I had to, overnight them a check for 6,000, 6,000, whatever it was, 800, 6,000. I don't even remember the exact amount. It's in the book, but out of my own money, because I didn't have access at that particular moment to her checking account to write a check from her account. And, I knew I was going to get it back, but still, I had to, come up with that much cash, which is not the amount of cash I normally keep sitting around. So I had to free up funds in order to mail a check, and then, wait for it all to come back around. And this is a thing a lot of caregivers face also. They face out of pocket costs that nobody reimburses. A dinner here, a pillow here, a flight. Um, I was always out of pocket for things that I just never bothered to get reimbursement for. And then there are things that you have to lay out money for. Everything from missing premiums, to paying caregivers, to paying a mortgage payment when there's money that's moving around, and you don't have access to it. You end up laying out a lot of money, and then trying to recoup it on the back end, which is where record keeping becomes really important. I kept a spreadsheet of any money that I spent, and when I was reimbursed, so that if my mom came back around, or if my brother had a problem with anything, there would be you know receipts of the paper trail.
yeah, that's good to keep the records. You did mention you didn't have access to your mom's checking account. I want to talk about that in a second. But first, you mentioned that one of the best things your mom did to help you was she had a printout of her prescriptions and her medical history.
Yeah.
Tell me, how did that come about, and how was it really helpful?
You know that scene in the movie where, like, there's somebody's in a medical emergency, and the person who's with them has to run to the medicine cabinet and throw all the pill bottles in a baggie
Hmm.
and take them to the hospital because they don't know what the person's taking. I didn't have to be that person. My mom had everything up to date on this one magical sheet of paper. I called it her cheat sheet, and that's how this whole thing got started, with me writing about um, my experience taking care of my mom. Is because I had a column due the day or 2 days after her surgery, and I'm sitting by her bedside, and I'm like, my brain's not working. What am I going to write about? So I wrote about her cheat sheet. It was a wonderful thing. It had her name, her address, her social security number, all of her dosages of her medications, all of her conditions, every surgery she ever had, her allergies, the names of all her doctors, and just anything that a doctor in a hospital setting is going to ask you, her insurance information, all of it was like on a double-sided piece of paper, and it was everything that I needed all in one place. It was fabulous.
Yeah, that's so helpful that she did it. I think I got a feeling that column went far and wide. Of wait a second, mom, you got to do this for me.
Yeah.
But a lot of people were passing that on. That's good advice. And speaking of advice and columns, you write I'm not going to call it an advice column, but maybe it is a bit financial advice. You're reporting a lot of things in the financial world. Just tell me a little bit about what you do and who you write for.
Yeah, we're careful with the word advice, aren't we? We give out
Yes, indeed. Yes,
financial
financial education.
financial
Yes.
education, because we're not directly giving advice to anybody,
Hmm.
as per our fiduciary responsibility. But
Yes.
I write a financial planning column for Market Watch. I have a CFP, but I don't practice. I don't see clients. I don't handle anybody's money. But I talk to people about their money and I explain to them the financial concepts involved in managing their money and the psychological concepts and the behavioral concepts that help us to make better decisions about, how we save and how we spend.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I'm sure. And like you mentioned, a lot of times in your column, it's saying you got to use a power of attorney. Go get a power of attorney. In
Yeah.
your book, you say everyone over 18 should have a power of attorney document. But then one of your chapters, it's titled, "It's hard to use a power of attorney."
Yeah.
And I got to channel my inner Jerry Seinfeld and say, what's the deal with power of attorney documents?
Yeah, I wish I knew what the banks were thinking on this score because they make it so hard. I know what they're thinking. They think that they think they're preventing fraud, which is a very admirable goal. But they do it in such a way that real people can't function in this environment. I'm helping somebody with this now who's having, an even harder time than I had. I had one bank that I really needed access to, and I they said no to me with my power of attorney documents for my mom, and I just really had to stand my ground. And it took one visit where they said no. They said make an appointment and come back, and we'll try to help you. That appointment was 2 hours. I needed another 2 hour appointment. So it was
Mm,
probably like 5 or 6 hours of my time, my valuable time where I am
right.
working. My mom's in an emergency in the hospital. I've got two teenage children at home, and a life to lead. And I had to spend, 6 full hours sitting at this woman's desk in order
Mm,
to get this problem solved. That is like a full work day of a human being's life in order to do this. The person I'm helping now needs access to six different banks for their
oh, wow.
parents, and every bank tells them something different. One bank just came back to them, denied the paperwork for a second time because they didn't send originals with a raised seal.
Mm,
New York doesn't even do raised seals for a notary.
yeah.
Like you can't even get that anymore. And so it's become like this impossible scenario to actually be power of attorney because people know that if they know anything they know they're supposed to get these documents, right? And you have a power of attorney document, it's like two printed sheets of paper. um the two printed sheets of paper do nothing for you. Like you can't just wave them around and like declare, I am the power of attorney, hear me roar. Like the two sheets of paper are absolutely essential, but they mean nothing in your hands. You have to take them to the institution you want to communicate with and have them processed. And every place has a different process, and they have to send it to the legal department, and they have to, then verify your information and your identity and your relationship with the person, and they make you jump through an innumerable amount of hoops in order to use these things. And sometimes they'll just say no because something is wrong in the documents, or they somehow don't correspond to their version of what the document should be. And then you're really stuck.
Yeah. Well, and imagine how hard it'd be if you didn't have the power of
Yes.
attorney. And so at
Well,
least it's a help. It gets you in the right direction.
it gets you in the right direction. If so the answer to what happens if you don't have the power of attorney is you have to go to court. And you have to
Mm,
start a family court or a probate court hearing to get conservatorship over the person who you need to access their financial records, and you have to have the court grant that power. There's really no other choice in
mhm.
the matter, and that's an expensive and long process. The attorneys I've talked to have told me that the starting rate is around $18,000.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
for something
Yeah.
that you could
That's
download for free. Like right
Right.
now, you could press a button and download a power of attorney document and sign it and get it notarized.
Mhm.
The document will be free. The notary might be $4, if you can't
Right.
find somebody to do it for free at your bank. And, then you're all set if an emergency happens, you
Yep.
know.
So expect your power of attorney isn't a magical magic wand,
Exactly.
but you better have that non-magical wand. You better have that going into it. And you talked about your experience with one bank. You also mentioned somebody else who had multiple experiences with banks. They had to sue a bank just to allow them to have the power
Yes.
of attorney. And then there's the government. It seems like the government, which runs the legal system, says we don't recognize power of attorneys. How is
Yeah.
that possible?
A federal agency will not recognize a civil power of attorney. Each agency has their own forms and their own hoops to jump through. And so, if you fill out representative form at Medicaid or Medicare, it doesn't work at Social Security or the VA or the IRS. Everybody has their own forms. And I had to do this for my mom, for the IRS, and for Social Security, and for Medicare, three separate times. Um,
Wow.
I'll tell you, for the IRS, it was the most infuriating system. But I
Hmm.
thought that was the worst one. But apparently, getting to be somebody's representative at the VA is the absolute
Okay.
worst of the red tape, that there is in the government.
Yeah, it's amazing. But I guess there we go. Don't you're you're in for the long haul, but in a way, that's what you sign up for, and somebody's gotta do it. You did it for your mom. You also included your story with a lot of other caregivers. You brought some other caregivers into it. What commonalities did you see? What did people bring up just about every time? Like what should I expect? What should people be expecting if we're called to do this for somebody?
Everybody reached their breaking point over something. Um, I'm not usually a journalist who makes people. There's not a lot of crying in the interviews I do. I mean, I've
Sure.
interviewed you a lot of times. I've never made you cry.
Not
Um,
yet. Not
Not
yet.
yet, not yet. Maybe
Yeah,
this time we'll get to some stuff. But
there you go.
I deal with, like, wonky financial topics, and it's not a lot of heartbreak. But every single person I interviewed cried at some point, because this stuff is just so hard, and it's hard in that really frustrating way. You know how, like, you cry out of frustration, like you've done everything, you've tried your best, and you just, like, like this one man I spoke to, was a former colleague of mine, was trying to help somebody who was not a family member, and he was at the Social Security office, and he gets, to his turn in line. And this is not his first visit there to try to get this job done, to help his friend. And, he's still missing something. And he's like, he just fell apart. He just started crying. Like, it's just so frustrating. There's always something, no matter your best intentions, no matter how much you think you have this whole thing worked out. You have a trust, you have a will, you have, all your beneficiary designations. There is going to be something that trips you up. I talked to one estate attorney. He is an expert in elder law, and he was head of the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys for a while. He's been doing this for 30 some years. When his own mother died, he had everything wrapped up with a bow. He thought that they had done, the best job that they could possibly do. Everything passed seamlessly. They had a trust, they had beneficiary designations. It all was fabulous. Not fabulous because his mother had passed, but, it was all working out. And then, in order to transfer the retirement account from his mother's name, to split among the siblings involved, they needed what is called a medallion stamp. Have you
Yes.
encountered a medallion stamp?
Uh, yes, I hate seeing those, because you can't find them.
You
It's like you see that it's required and you say, "Well, this is gonna take a while. I need you
Yeah,
to sit
so
down."
a medallion stamp is like a notary stamp on crack. You can't just go anywhere and get this, you know, document stamped by a bank official. First of all, the bank official has to be authorized to have medallion stamp powers, and those people are rare. And I, for instance, went looking for one and couldn't find one at all. Um, they need to then verify that your form that you need to fill out is appropriate, and that you are positively identified as the person. And they usually won't do that unless you're a customer, and unless they, examine the documents and find it necessary. And he couldn't get it done. Like, he's an expert. I couldn't get it done when I needed it done. Like, it's like an impossible task.
Yeah, it's a shame. No wonder everyone reaches their breaking point, like you said, which I guess it's unavoidable. Know that if you're someone that reached their breaking point, you're not alone. You've been there. Everyone's going to go through it. You write in the book about a breaking point you reached. You were in the hospital. It was the time when your mom was. She said it's time to go to hospice. And what got to me is that you mentioned one of the biggest parts of the emotion is I'm just going to quote you if that's all right. You
Yeah,
wrote, "Around my mom, I wanted her to be the one in control and making all the decisions. Even though I was past 50 at the time, I didn't feel capable of being the adult." And of course, you knew you were capable, right? You're a financial planning columnist, but that role reversal, I think, is what got you to you. And I hear that a
yeah.
lot. Tell me a little bit more.
I mean, it's still your mom. Your mom's supposed to be your mom, and I respected my mom, and I love my mom, and I trusted her, and she's the one that's supposed to be doing all this stuff. And it was really hard to not to try to step in and take care of her. I don't have those feelings at all when I am making decisions for my kids. I'm the mom. And so it was just really hard to be her proxy in some of those situations. The second guessing on the hospice stuff was just really hard because you're making a decision that really truly can't be reversed. And you know it's heavy.
Hmm. Yeah, it's heavy, and it seemed like your mom was prepared in a way before you were, and it's interesting how a lot of times like the kids maybe are trying to keep mom around, and mom said, you know, you'll be fine.
Yeah,
One of um, your one of your first chapters was called "Start with a Final Resting Place,"
yeah,
and that was something that was important to her. Tell me how that maybe. Um, how did that help out, after she had passed? What was she foreseeing? Did she know what she was talking about? Like, okay, we got this covered.
yeah.
Why did she want to start there?
So she wanted to start there because my dad died 5 years before my mom, and when we went to bury him, they had dug him the wrong spot, and that
Oh,
really
all right.
yeah.
Well,
So talk about irrevocable decisions.
yeah.
He's in the wrong spot for eternity, and she was so mad about that. She was determined that that shouldn't happen to anybody else in the family. It's one of those things, like, I don't want to burden my children, and I don't want them to do the hard things that I had to do. um this was the worst thing for her, and she wanted to set that right with the rest of us. And so I would say that when it came time to make all of those arrangements, it was much easier for me, because we had just done it for my father, 5 years prior, and I just had, there was a number to call. I called the number and I said, just do for her exactly the plan that we had for my dad. And the only thing that we had to do differently is that he died before the age of streaming and the age of COVID, and
Yes.
we had to decide what streaming to put into the service, and what how to make
Sure.
that available. And that was like the only thing that I really had to decide. She had a life insurance policy designed for burial, and so while we didn't have the money up front, I knew it was coming, and I didn't have to worry about the cost.
Hmm.
So I put everything on my credit card, and by the time that the credit card bill came due, the money from the life insurance was there to pay it.
Okay. Yeah, she's done some planning ahead of time, and yet it still was tough
Yeah,
to go through for her. Tough for you to go through. You mentioned that she has passed on. You had the service. There's some things that happened afterward, the financial documents, and you do say that you've inherited some money. right? It doesn't seem like life changing. You're not jetting off to Tahiti or anything, but you
No.
call this Bubbie money. Tell me about Bubbie
Yeah.
money and what that means to you.
Bubbie is the Yiddish word for grandmother, and it's what the kids called my mom. And my mom was
Okay.
kind of the Bubbie to everyone. My mom was that kind of person. She was a teacher. She was just, everybody went to her for advice, and she cooked food. Like she was just exactly what you would want in a Bubbie. Um, and her whole life was just about like making us happy and making us smile. And so, now when we do anything that's a little extra, let's go for ice cream, let's, whatever it is. Let's send the kids to college. It's Bubbie money. Don't worry about that. Like, don't normally where I would be frugal. Don't worry about it. It's Bubbie money. Because Bubbie would want us to have, stuff that makes us smile. Um, so I think that that's a fitting legacy for her because, um, anything can be Bubbie money, and we just think about her all the time that way.
Yeah, well, that's a great part of the legacy, and you introduced me to the term Bubbie money. I'm gonna try to use that and find ways to have my own, Bubbie money way. Like, how are you honoring others, or what are you
Yeah.
doing that's where the money's a joy, not a burden or something to track. Like, okay, you worked for the money for some reason, right? Your mom worked for the money. She ended up using some of it for her care, some of it to pass on, and that's exactly it. There's a lot of meaning behind the money you get. I think that's another reason why the title is great. It's My Mother's Money. I'm guessing you've got a pretty good at least mental accounting. Like, this is mom's money, this is Bubbie money. Is that the case for you?
Yeah, so inherited IRA rules for a non-spouse
Well,
are
that
are
yes,
very
of course.
specific that way.
You
Um,
have an account number specifically about the inherited
yeah,
IRA. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so I have actually them labeled on my brokerage statement. There's IRA mom, and there's IRA
Hmm.
dad because for
Yeah,
some
I
reason
suppose.
I had to inherit um I had to inherit the account
Yes.
separately because one originated with my father, then passed
Yep.
to my mother, and then when it passed to me, it wouldn't go through the back funnel of the financial company
Yep.
because somehow my dad's name was on the paperwork at some point, and this was a
Hmm.
whole thing. Like nothing is easy, right?
Yes.
Like you fill
Yep.
out the forms and you have all the proper documents, and like it was like 3 months to get that money settled
Mm.
because like the back end switches wouldn't connect, and I had to
Hmm.
chase after it, just relentlessly. Nothing about the financial system makes any sense to me, even with all of my training and experience.
Yeah. Yeah. That's and well, we're talking about the money part though, which is the frustrating. And thankfully, I think I felt a good positive ending with your book, where you wrote the money my parents left me was dwarfed by the emotional legacy they gave me, and that's great to see that you received that. And I think that's the hope all of us have when we're passing on money or whatever it might be to the next generations.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right on. Good. Well, I've got one more question for you, Beth. Before that, tell us what's the best way to reach out to you, the best way to get a hold of your book.
I keep things simple. I am just my name everywhere I go. My website is bethpinsker.com. I'm Beth Pinsker on social media. I've been a journalist for 30 years. I'm pretty easy to find out there. I have a button on my website that says ask a question, and I answer questions either on the website or in my Market Watch column.
Yeah, that's great. We'll put links to all that in the show notes so you can get a hold of Beth and have links to the book. It's a great book. I read through it and taught me a lot as being someone that in your position. I know this stuff. I read about this stuff. I deal with this stuff, but it sure is different when it's your own family when you're going through it.
Well, thank you very
Yep.
much. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah, enjoyed the book, and we were just talking before we hit record. Being fellow authors, we're now in like a bit of a brotherhood here of of authors that came out with books at the similar time. It's great. Well, I've got one final question for you, Beth, and that is, tell us something about yourself that few people know about. And remember, this podcast is rated clean.
um, I don't know if few people know this, but certainly today, I started my career as a film critic. And it doesn't, like, my career path makes no sense to anybody, but, like, I my very first job was an intern on Late Night with David Letterman. And,
Okay.
now I'm, writing about my mom and financial topics. So, go figure that out. I don't have any idea how that happened.
Yeah. I suppose, well, if I ever see a top 10 column from you, I know where it started, where it came from.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Good. Well, thanks for coming on the show, Beth, sharing with us about your journey as you were taking care of your mother's money. We'll have links to the book, My Mother's Money, in the show notes. Thank you, Beth.
Thank you.
Yeah. And thank you for listening to the Retire Today podcast. We believe if you know more about your money, you will feel better about your money and you will make better money decisions. Hi, I'm Jeremy Keil. If you'd like to learn how my team can help you get more income, pay less in taxes, and avoid big retirement mistakes, head on over to keilfp.com. That's KEILFP.com.